Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to today's Hindu analysis, and the first article that we will discuss today is about India accepting Joe Biden's proposal to join the new trade initiative for the Indo Pacific region, which is being called the IPEF, or the Indo Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity. Now, as you know, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and many other leaders across the world, including President of the US Joe Biden, are in Tokyo to attend the ongoing Quad Summit. Now, in that particular summit, there was another conference held specifically for the Indo Pacific Economic Framework, which has been initiated by the US President. Now, let me clarify here. This is not a free trade agreement like the RCEP or the Trans Pacific Partnership. This is a different kind of an economic framework under which the countries are getting together and they are deciding that we will ensure that our supply chain is strengthened, that there are no trade barriers between our nations, and there is no expectation that the taxes will reduce amongst the nations. It is more about other pillars that have been decided by the leaders. Now, this particular framework will revolve around four pillars, mainly about trade, supply chain resilience, so making sure that if a specific country needs certain components in their particular industry, then the supply chain is robust. Then it would also focus on clean energy and decarbonization, and also taxes and anti-corruption measures. So it is not necessarily about reducing taxes or giving much more market access. It is more about ensuring that there's a robust economic partnership amongst all these partner nations. Now, as per this particular group, it includes 7 out of the 10 members of ASEAN. Then it also has the Quad nations and New Zealand. Together, these nations make up about 40% of the world's entire GDP. The three ASEAN members which are not a part of this group include Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. Apart from that, all other 7 ASEAN members joined this particular conference and they decided to be a part of this particular framework. Now, it is also being seen as something to counter China. As you know, entire world's manufacturing is highly dependent on China, specifically for the supply chains that initiate from China. And that is why when the COVID pandemic started, the entire world saw a meltdown because they were just not able to get the components that they require from China. Even today, there has been such a shortage of the semiconductor chips which are required for every smart instrument around the world, mainly because of the supply chain disruptions in China, Taiwan, etc. And that is why this is an initiative to ensure that we are not dependent on China only, and we increase our resources and increase the places where these kind of activities actually take place. This is another initiative of the US after the Blue Dot Network, which was to certify infrastructure projects against a set criteria, which was launched in 2019 by US, Japan, and Australia. Now, the interesting part is if you are seeing it from the Indian point of view, you would realize that in the past few years, ever since the second term of the current government began, we have been much more focused and much more forthcoming about joining multiple economic agreements, including the free trade agreements. We have had one with Australia, the UAE, we are also in talks with the UK, we are also in talks with EU to sign these free trade agreements, and now the IPEF. This is very different as compared to the approach that we used to take earlier. If you look at Indian government's record in the past 3 or 4 decades, you would see that we were not really keen on joining these free trade agreements, mainly because we have always been concerned that our local market, our local manufacturers, farmers, etc., would not be able to cope up with the global competition. And that is why, even at the last moment, we decided to step out of the RCEP also, which was led by the ASEAN nations, despite being a part of all the negotiations till the very last stage. But the past couple of years have seen a welcome change in the approach that has been taken up by the Indian government, which now also includes the Indo Pacific Economic Framework. Now, this article does not give you a lot of detail, mainly because a lot of details have not even been furnished by these governments. All that we know is that this particular group would have members from 13 nations, including US, India, Japan, then Australia. These four comprise a Quad, then Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, New Zealand, Philippines, Singapore, South Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam. Apart from this, the US government also clarified that this is an open platform. That is, Any country is free to join it, but as expected, the Chinese government has criticized it, calling it anti-China and an exclusive group that will only increase the tension existing in the Indo Pacific region in the past few years. Not just this, even the island of Taiwan has been excluded from this particular pact. Which is interesting because everyone thought that since Taiwan is a leading producer of semiconductor chips right now, without its inclusion, it would be very, very difficult to improve the supply chain bottlenecks that we see in the field of computer chips right now. But for now, it has not been made a part of this project. No other details have been furnished apart from the fact that the group will be focusing on four specific pillars that we talked about. Negotiations will now begin, and it will take at least an year or year and a half for these negotiations to conclude and for us to see what will be the final shape of this agreement. The next article that we have is again from the front page of the Hindu newspaper, which is a very unfortunate report by the ILO, the International Labour Organization, which has pointed out that the world may have lost about 11.2 crore jobs. The situation is even worse amongst women as compared to men. All this has been taken out from a report published by the ILO titled The World of Work. In this report, the ILO said that after the pandemic, in 2021, specifically in the last quarter, we saw a good economic growth. We saw that the number of working hours improved all across the world. We expected that this trend will continue in 2022 also, but that is not the case. In fact, in the first quarter of 2022, as per the ILO report, the number of working hours have actually come down by 3.8%, which may have resulted in a job loss of over 11 crore jobs. The situation was seen to be far worse in nations such as India and lower middle income nations, and it had a major impact on female workforce majorly. The report says for every 100 women who were working prior to the pandemic, 12.3 would have lost their jobs. Amongst male, this number was 7.5. Although this is unfortunate, but this is not really a surprise. Whenever you see such a calamity, be it the natural calamity or an economic problem, it is bound to hurt the female workforce much more as compared to the males, and that is why we have to be extra careful while forming policies for inclusion of females in the official workforce of the government. The report said that there has been a growing divergence between the rich and the poor economies, and also within a particular nation, the gap between the rich and the poor population is increasing. It is one of the widest in India and in Europe as well. As I said, this ILO report called the World of Work headline that the recovery that we were expecting in the global labor market is actually going downhill once again. Let me give you some other important pointers from this particular report that I have taken from the website of ILO. The report says that in 2021, 3 in 5 workers, that is 60% of the workers, lived in nations where the labor incomes had not returned to the level of the fourth quarter of 2019. That means that the labor incomes have still not gone back to the pre-pandemic era. So there may be jobs, you might still be employed, but the salary that you're earning or the wages that you're getting is still nowhere near the wages that you were getting in the pre-pandemic era. The report also says that the gender gap in the work hour has also increased during the pandemic. Women in informal employment have been the worst affected, especially in the low and middle income nations. There has also been a sharp increase in the job vacancies in advanced economies as well, which has led to the tightening of labor markets with a growing number of jobs available relative to the job seekers. The report also says that not all the blame can be put on the pandemic only. In fact, there have been multiple policies of the governments, including the war in Ukraine, that has led to this crisis becoming much more than what it should have been. The report points out that there has been a constant increase in the prices of food and other commodities, which has hurt the poor household across the world. We have been seeing what is happening with the wheat prices across the world, which has forced even India to go back on its promise of exporting wheat to a lot of nations, and we have also banned the export of wheat. Just like Indonesia, for a few days, banned the export of palm oil as well. All of this is being done because the entire world right now is going through a phase of very, very high inflation. Also, from the UPSC Prelims point of view specifically, you need to remember what are the other important reports that the ILO publishes. So these are the four main reports that the ILO actually publishes. The one that we were discussing is called the World of Work Report. Then we also have the World Social Protection Report, the Global Wage Report, the World Employment and the Social Outlook Report. All these are published by the ILO and can be downloaded from the website of the ILO. The next article that we have here is on the topic of family planning in India. Now, the government's efforts towards ensuring family planning in India are very, very old. In fact, this was one of the first India-wide initiative that Government of India took right after independence in 1952 itself. And the results have been seen on the paper now. In fact, India's family planning program has ensured improved access to contraceptives, which is why our reproduction rate in India is on a constant decline, as we have seen in the National Family Health Survey number 5. However, despite that, there are still some concerns. For example, in the states of Meghalaya and Tripura, there is a rise in the number of adolescents who are childbearing. So, adolescents who have their own child or who have to take care of the child are increasing in these states, which is a major cause of concern. COVID-19 pandemic has also made the situation worse because of the dearth of financial resources and decline in the access of the contraceptives, that all these initiatives of the government authorities might have been disrupted. The author here is making a point that now India needs to take one step further. Till now, we have been ensuring that there is enough access to contraceptives for married couples. But now we have to ensure that even unmarried youth also have enough access to contraceptives, because we can't afford a situation in which youth are getting pregnant when they don't want to have a baby. All this can be done by using contraceptives if you don't want to go ahead with a medical complexity. For past few years, great job has been done by our frontline health workers, including the Ashas and the people working in the Anganwadis, who made sure that contraceptives were home delivered at many places across the country, which is what has led to the decrease in the rate of reproduction. We also need to make sure that we further strengthen the capacity of the health workers in the country by using Family Planning Logistics Management Information System, which is a government designed software that ensures that we have much better track and availability of stock when it comes to contraceptives, so that they can be put to use all across the country. We also have to make sure that we have enough education and awareness programs about what is the right age of marriage, about the safe sexual behavior, the use of contraceptives, reproductive health, etc. We also have to ensure that this particular topic is much more about a change in the mental point of view, apart from changing the habits. So, unless we educate the person and unless we put this in a habit, unless we give them a nudge, it would be very difficult if you ask the people to actually use contraceptives. In India, even today, buying of contraceptives or talking about contraceptives is still being seen as a taboo. That is why, especially in tier 2, tier 3 cities, we still have a rate of reproduction which is much higher as compared to what the ideal number should be. A lot of state governments have also made sure that they run programs about teaching the young couples about the use of contraceptives and why family planning is essential. For example, we have a program called Prachar in Bihar, we have Yari Dosti in Mumbai, GEMS in Goa. All these aim to increase awareness amongst the youth about family planning, the use of contraceptives, and how it should be a joint decision of the family, or whether or not you have to go ahead with expanding your family or not. Now, there is a very interesting and a disturbing trend that you actually see across the country. Unfortunately, the responsibility of ensuring family planning or to curtail the size of family actually falls on the females in India much more as compared to the males. The females are the ones who are actually blamed for not being able to control the size of the family. And rather than the males adopting contraceptives or ensuring that they know about family planning, it is the females who are being forced to sterilize or undergo sterilization operations. This is a graph to show how much of a disparity there is between males and female sterilization. As you know, sterilization is a medical procedure after which you would not be able to reproduce more babies. Now, if you actually see state by state, in every state across the country, the number of females who are sterilizing is much higher as compared to the number of males who are undergoing this sterilization procedure in the same state. This is the kind of disparity that you have to be aware of. That is, we have forced the responsibility of curtailing the size of the family on the women without the males taking responsibility, which is a very, very sad and harsh reality, which is what requires a change in the behavior of the overall male population specifically. Let me also reflect a bit about the history of family planning in India. As I said, early on when we just became independent in 1952 itself, India started a family planning program. But actually, the talk about family planning goes back even before our independence. It was in 1927 that Raghunath Dhondu Karve published a Marathi language magazine called Samaj Swasthya. In this magazine, he discussed about why is it necessary to have population control with the use of contraceptives. Also, just to give you the connection, Raghunath Dhondu Karve was actually the eldest son of the Bharat Ratna Maharshi Dhondu Keshav Karve. So he comes from a very, very illustrious family. He proposed that the Indian government should take up population control program, but a lot of tall leaders of that time, including Mahatma Gandhi, were actually opposed to it. For Mahatma Gandhi, he did not want large families, but according to him, self control should be the best contraceptive rather than using any other particular device. In 1952, however, the government of India became the first country in the developing world to create a state sponsored family planning program. Now, in India, unlike China, we have never made it compulsory or we have never enforced it through law that this is the maximum number of children that you can have. But yes, the government has been trying to give a nudge to the people towards having only two kids and not more than that. This program was tied up with the 5-year plans that the government used to release till 1979. After which, the Indira Gandhi government in 1970s even forcefully implemented a sterilization program that turned out to be a failure with a lot of atrocities being imposed on the people, after which the government took a step back, and since then the governments have been very, very careful in talking about family planning because this brings back very bad memories of the Indira Gandhi era. The next article that we have here is about a Supreme Court verdict recently in which the Supreme Court has said that the governments in India cannot make vaccinations compulsory. Now, the background of the story is that in many states across the country, what is happening is that there are some restrictions which are imposed on people who have not taken their vaccines for whatever reasons. For example, in Maharashtra, if you have to take the local train, you have to be vaccinated. Now, the question here is, can the state governments impose certain restrictions on those people who don't want to take the vaccine? And the next question is, can the government make it compulsory for everyone to take a vaccine? The answer here, as given by the Supreme Court, is number one, no, you cannot make it compulsory over anyone to take the vaccine. Second, the Supreme Court also said that these restrictions imposed by the state governments on unvaccinated people also go against their personal liberty, and that is why they should not be allowed. The authors here are arguing against the judgment of the Supreme Court. The authors here are pointing out that the concept of public health should be getting preference over any individual's liberty. And that is why it is a responsibility of the states. They are the ones who are responsible for ensuring that there is no health emergency. And for that, if they have to curb the personal liberty of a few people, that should be allowed. The authors here say that the Supreme Court, while deciding such cases, usually decides on the concept of proportionality test. Proportionality test means there are three concepts that the Supreme Court follows. Number one, any restriction imposed by the state should be sanctioned by law. Number one. Second, any proposed action by the state should have legitimate state aim. That is, there should be a proper aim behind the government putting restrictions on the people. And third, the Supreme Court says that the extent of interference by the state action should be proportionate to the need of the interference. Means the government should only interfere as much as required and not more than that. The Supreme Court in this case said that the third point is not matching. The Supreme Court said that any government wanting to impose restrictions on unvaccinated people should not do so until the number of cases and the infection rate increases. Otherwise, they should not be allowed to do that. This is what the authors are arguing against. The authors here are saying that there are examples from US also where the courts have imposed such restrictions and have asked the government to make it compulsory for the people to take vaccine. They have taken an example of 1905 in which the US Supreme Court had said that it is okay for the government to punish citizens who have rejected the smallpox vaccine. At that time, when smallpox was spreading far and wide in Cambridge, the government decided to impose a $5 fine on those people who don't want to take the smallpox vaccine. This matter went to the US Supreme Court and they said that the government is right because public health has to take priority over the liberty or the freedom of one single individual. The US Supreme Court said the same thing in 1922 also. In terms of India also, the authors say that in 2017, in Asha Ranjan versus the state of Bihar case, the court had said that whenever there is a point of time when you have to choose between the individual interest and the interest of the interest of the community should always come first and they cannot be sacrificed for individuals' interest. But even then, the Supreme Court decided to go against what the set pattern is and has said that the government cannot impose vaccines on people who don't want it for whatever reason possible. Authors also say that the Indian government is a signatory to the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, under which the government of India is bound to take measures to ensure that people enjoy the highest attainable physical and mental health standards, which will only be done if people take vaccine, and there are enough studies to support that. Even ICMR studies suggest that amongst the people who actually passed away in the second wave, the number of people who did not take the vaccines were much higher as compared to people who had taken the vaccine. There is enough scientific evidence to suggest across the world now that vaccines do work, and that is why the government should be allowed to impose these vaccine mandates. As I said, all this is because the Supreme Court had said that the COVID 19 vaccines should not be made compulsory. One of the examples of restriction being imposed was the Maharashtra government's decision to not allow unvaccinated people from boarding the local trains in Maharashtra. Also, let me share with you a few examples of those nations which have actually made vaccination compulsory. If you actually look at this map, you would see that there are a few nations, although smaller ones, that have actually made vaccine compulsory, which does not include India. The next article that we have here is about the unfortunate events in Dima Hasao, that is a district in the hilly area of Assam. It has been battered by incessant rains in the past few days, and the result is that the all important railway line between the Lamding in Brahmaputra Valley and Badarpur in the Barak Valley has been severely affected. While many people are saying that it will cost the exchequer 1,000 crore rupees, the other people say that the situation of the railway line is so bad now that it will never be able to get back to its original shape and form. The other problem is that because of this particular railway line being affected, we see that there are other parts of the northeast, including Manipur, Mizoram, and Tripura, also that have been cut off since they were dependent on this particular railway line, especially for the movements of goods and other commodities. Now, the Dima Hasao district is a very important and interesting center in the northeast. It lies in the Dauki fault, which straddles between Bangladesh and parts of northeast, so it is a very fragile area. That is why even the British engineers took 16 years to build this railway line in the narrow gauge form. After which, the government of India decided in 1996 that we should expand it, we should convert it into broad gauge. Broad gauge means that there would be bigger trains and carriages that would be able to run at a better speed, so we will be able to transport more stuff and more people. This is where the problem started. A lot of locals say that this particular project of the government to convert this meter gauge into broad gauge went against the environmental consensus and it harmed the environment there. Not just this, people also say that in the past few years, a lot of new roads have been built and realigned specifically for this project, which have also led to this problem. We also have the issue of illegal coal mining, because of which whenever it rains in this part of the country, it leads to a lot of flooding and the water not having any space to flow. all that has led to this devastation that we are seeing in the district of Dima Hasao in Assam right now. And to understand the seriousness of this matter, do understand that this is not about just one particular district. It is about all the other districts in the state of Manipur, Mizoram, and Tripura which are connected to this particular railway line. This is also very, very important in India's Look East policy because the government's plan was that the railway link will be connected to Bangladesh's Chittagong port through Tripura's border points. And that is how we will be able to expand our railway network till Bangladesh, which will result in much better transportation of people and transportation of goods, whatever is required, especially in the northeast part of India. It has also put into danger the 111-kilometer Jiribam Imphal railway project in Manipur that was being built on a similar terrain. And now the questions are being asked about whether or not does it make any sense to go ahead with such projects in such fragile area in the northeast part of the country. The northeastern states for a long time have been demanding that they should be getting better connectivity through Myanmar and Bangladesh because in these kind of weather situations when their connectivity with the mainland is actually disrupted, they should be having an alternate route through Bangladesh or Myanmar to supply the essential commodities that they require. Now, this shows you the situation that we have in the railway station in Dima Hasao. As you can see, the entire trains are disrupted. They have been actually forced off this particular track. There is no way that the trains can run in this particular situation. It will require a lot of efforts and money just to clear all this from this railway station. As I said earlier, the local people of Assam have been blaming not just this particular project but also questions on why was this railway project being extended into a broad gauge and also why the roads in this particular area are being realigned. Because according to them, disaster was just waiting to hit this railway project because of the ongoing activities in the northeast part of the country. This is an earlier news about the same railway track under which Tripura was planning to have food, fuel, etc. through Chittagong port in Bangladesh earlier when there were Assam floods that had hit that particular area. As you know, Assam provides us a gateway towards all the other northeastern states, and if this particular railway line is hit, it will be very difficult for us to reach till the northeast part of the country. These were the important articles from the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one, the Indian government has shown a new vigor in the last few years towards joining new trade agreements. Discuss. Second, the success of India's family planning program depends on changing the male mindset and having them take more responsibility. Do you agree? Elaborate. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video.